chill wind howled through the skeletal trees that clawed at the imposing facade of Lactus Castle, its icy fingers drumming against the shuttered windows. Inside, the air hung heavy with unspoken horrors and the faint coppery temps of blood. The year was 1590, and Europe stood teetering on the precipice of change. But within these four grey walls, time had stopped. All was hushed anticipation and morbid rituals. The fading embers of the hearth cast dancing shadows that writhed like tormented souls across the stone floor, mirroring the turmoil in Countess Elizabeth's heart. She paced restlessly, her velvet slippers making muffled thuds on the flagstones. Her face, usually so resplendent, was drawn and pale, etched with worry lines that spoke of sleepless nights and haunting dreams. Despite the opulence of her midnight blue gown, she appeared ashen, a ghost haunting her own gilded cage. Her fingers, adorned with the finest jewels, nervously twisted a crimson silk scarf, pulling at its ends as if trying to unravel some unseen knot. Suddenly, a raven slammed against the window pane, its harsh cry piercing the silence. Elizabeth flinched as if startled by some inner vision. Was it an omen? Had the darkness that brewed within her finally manifested in the physical world? With a sigh that spoke of weariness beyond her years, Elizabeth sank onto a nearby chaise lounge, her gaze falling on a silver-hand mirror resting on a small table beside her. As she stared into its depths, she saw not her own reflection, but the tormented visage of her soul. In those bottomless pools of midnight stared back at her, accusing, judging. Were these her own eyes, or those of some creature spawned from nightmare? How had she become this hollow shell? Where had the vibrant, vivacious girl gone, the one who had laughed easily, loved deeply, and dreamed of a better world? The castle echoed with her loneliness. Servants scurried about their duties, yet no one dared approach their mistress. They sensed her torment, the encroaching darkness that threatened to consume her whole. Even the castle itself seemed to be holding its breath, caught between worlds as if dreading some terrible awakening. In the distance, a clock chimed, each toll resonating in Elizabeth's bones, marking the passing time, reminding her of the darkness that awaited. The thought of the ritual to come sent shivers down her spine. She understood its necessity. The pact made long ago with the devil himself, a bargain that ensured the Bathiani family's unchallenged rule over Hungary. Yet, with each passing year, the price of that power grew heavier, more soul-wringing. Her husband, Ferenc, had died on the battlefield, his noble soul spilled on the very soil he had sworn to protect. His parting letters, clutched tightly in her hand, were soaked with his blood and his sorrow, begging her to keep the old ways alive. Without him, she feared she might falter, that the whispers in her own heart might grow too loud to ignore. Elizabeth's thoughts drifted to the village below the castle, nestled in the valley like a child in a cradle, unaware of the horrors that stalked its people. Her gaze hardened with ruthless resolve. Soon, new blood would stain the chalice, keeping their unholy pact alive. And among the innocents sent to her dungeon, there would be a girl who reminded her of her younger self, a girl who would carry the weight of her family's sins upon her innocent shoulders. Ferenc's words echoed in her mind, urging her to be strong. She owed it to him, to their unborn child, and to the legacy of her bloodline, a legacy that stretched back to Vlad the Impaler, who was rumored to have dipped his bread in blood and danced with demons. As night deepened, tendrils of black as pitch snaked in from the corners of the room, wrapping themselves around Elizabeth's heart, squeezing the breath from her lungs. The castle groaned, settling into its eternal vigil, shrouding Elizabeth in its suffocating embrace. Outside, the wind moaned, a requiem for the souls that had perished within these very walls. When the clock struck midnight, the full horror of her task descended upon Elizabeth. Summoning her courage, she rose from the chaise lounge, her movements stiff from disuse, and beckoned for her servants to gather. 2 men and 3 women, all bearing the mark of their servitude, stepped forward. Their faces were drawn and haggard, their eyes dull with a nameless dread that mirrored her own. Among them was Anna, a young maid whose youthful face still held a trace of innocence. Though her eyes were clouded with a terrible knowledge, she had been plucked from her family's humble cottage as a prize, her future bought and sold in a transaction as cold and hard as coin. With a curt nod, Elizabeth dismissed them all but Anna. As the others filed out of the room, murmurs weaving tales of blood sacrifices and midnight pacts in the dim oil lamplight, only Anna remained. "Anna," Elizabeth began, her voice hoarse from disuse, "tonight is a night like any other." Anna's hand trembled as she poured the crimson liquid into a silver chalice, her gaze fixed on the floor, unable to meet her mistress's eyes. Her heart hammered against her ribs, threatening to burst free and betray her terror. But Elizabeth continued, oblivious to the turmoil raging within her servant. "We must drink the blood of the innocent, feed on their life force to sustain our own. It is the way of our family, the burden we must bear." Anna swallowed, her throat dry as dust, and handed the chalice to her mistress. The ruby liquid swirled and shimmered, catching the faintest glimmer of moonlight filtering through the barred window. Each drop seemed to pulse with a life of its own, mocking Anna's own mortality. With a trembling hand, Elizabeth lifted the chalice to her lips and drank deeply. The metallic temps of blood flooded her mouth, mingling with the coppery taste of her own fear. She closed her eyes, bracing for the familiar surge of power that coursed through her veins like wildfire, chasing away the shadows of doubt and despair. Yet tonight, even as the life essence of the girl bound in the dungeon flowed into her, Elizabeth felt only a fleeting sense of vitality before it was chased away by an unsettling emptiness. Her reflection in the silver mirror seemed to mock her, a ghastly spectre leering back with vacant eyes. As the family feasted on the flesh of the young girl, her screams echoing in their ears, Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that they were merely prolonging the inevitable. Each bite brought her no pleasure, only a growing sense of revulsion. Her children, she thought, her precious children, would they, too, be condemned to this macabre ritual? Would they, too, grow up knowing only darkness? With a shudder, Elizabeth pushed away her plate. She could feel the life force of the young girl within her, a trapped bird beating against the bars of her ribs, desperate to break free. Her own humanity seemed to be slipping away, replaced by something cold and alien. Her brother sat opposite her, his face pale in the flickering firelight. He, too, struggled with the burden of their heritage, torn between the suffocating grip of tradition and the desperate hope of change. Each year the ritual became harder, the guilt and shame eating away at his soul until there was little left but hollowed-out grief. Anna watched them from the shadows, her heart breaking at the sight of the callous indifference on display. She had heard whispers of the darkness that resided in the hearts of the nobles, but had never believed them until she had seen it with her own eyes. As the night wore on, the revelry turned grotesque, the laughter echoing with chilling mirth. The family reveled in their depravity, lost in a world of their own making, oblivious to the cries of the innocent that drifted up from the dungeon. And so the cursed night wore on, the balance of power tilting precariously between Elizabeth's determination and her growing revulsion. With the first pale fingers of dawn creeping over the horizon, the ritual came to an end. The family, bloated with stolen life force, dispersed to their chambers, leaving behind the remnants of their feast and the echoes of their sins. Elizabeth, her heart heavy with foreboding, returned to her mirror, seeking solace in its depths. But what stared back at her was a monster born of ambition and bloodlust, a creature trapped in a gilded cage of her own design. Lactis Castle loomed against the grey dawn, a silent witness to the horror that unfolded within its cold embrace. The wind sighed through the crumbling stone, carrying with it the lament of countless souls lost to the insatiable darkness that thrived in the hearts of men. As the sun struggled to pierce the heavy cloak of clouds, a single ray of light fell across Elizabeth's chamber, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and the shattered fragments of her soul. Years bled into one another, and the family's rituals grew bolder, their castle a fortress of whispers and dread. Elizabeth, now widowed, ruled with an iron grip, her beauty preserved by the blood she consumed, but her mind fractured like shattered glass. She wandered the halls at night, her footsteps echoing like accusations, haunted by visions of the girls she had sacrificed. Each one had a face, a name, a story village, maidens lured with promises of service, only to meet the knife. Their screams lingered in her dreams, a chorus of guilt that she drowned in more rituals, convincing herself that power demanded such tolls. Yet, deep within, a mother's heart ached for her daughters, whom she shielded from the truth, fearing they too would inherit the curse. Her brother descended further into torment, his once noble frame gaunt from the weight of secrets. He had taken a wife, a gentle soul named Catiline, who sensed the darkness but loved him despite it. In stolen moments, he confessed fragments of the family's sins, his voice breaking like brittle bone. Catiline urged him to flee, to renounce the rituals that bound them, but loyalty to Elizabeth was a chain forged in blood. He participated in the feasts, each bite a betrayal of his conscience, his fate twisting toward ruin. Anna, the maid, had risen in the household, her silence bought with fear and favor. She tended to Elizabeth, bathing her in tubs rumored to be filled with virgin blood, the steam rising like ghosts from the grave. Her heart was a storm of conflict, hatred for the Countess warred with pity, for she saw the woman's loneliness, a queen trapped in her own horror. Yet Anna plotted in secret, smuggling letters to the outside world, her hands stained not just with blood but with ink of betrayal. She dreamed of escape, of a life unmarred by the castle's shadows, but her loyalty to the other servants, bound in shared suffering, held her back. The family's power peaked as rivals fell, their lands absorbed, their enemies silenced. Elizabeth hosted feasts where guests unknowingly partook in the forbidden, their laughter a hollow echo against the walls. But cracks appeared, rumors spread through the villages, girls vanishing like mist at dawn. King Matthias II, pressured by whispers at court, dispatched investigators, their arrival a thunderclap in the family's fragile world. Elizabeth felt the noose tightening, her rituals accelerating in desperation, each one a frantic grasp at immortality. Weakened by guilt, confronted her in the crypt. "Sister, this devours us all." But she silenced him with a glare, her eyes reflecting the flames that would soon consume their legacy. As soldiers approached the castle gates, the family gathered one last time, the air heavy with foreboding. The altar slick with fresh sacrifice, a tableau of doom painted in crimson and shadow. Within the shadowed halls of the Blood Countess, Elizabeth terror took root and blossomed. Her insatiable thirst for blood mingled with her lust for power, creating a chilling legacy that echoed through the ages. And as the story of Elizabeth, also known as the Blood Countess, unfolds, we delve into the abyss of a life fueled by darkness. Imagine waking up every morning not to the chirping of birds or the rustling of leaves, but to the haunting realization that your existence is a never-ending cycle of pain and torment. That was the grim reality for those unfortunate souls who crossed paths with Elizabeth. Her story is a chilling tale of sadism, power, and the depths of human depravity. Born into privilege on August 7, 1560, Elizabeth's early life offered a glimpse of the monster she would become. On April 21, 1614, her world shifted dramatically when her father, Nicholas, passed away. This event set in motion a series of unfortunate occurrences that would forever stain Elizabeth's soul. After her father's death, Elizabeth found herself under the guardianship of her mother. Anna, however, instead of finding solace in her mother's embrace, Elizabeth became the target of Anna's cruel whims. She was forced to endure painful procedures designed to make her more attractive, an early indication of the lengths to which her mother would go to maintain her beauty. These traumatic experiences left deep scars on young Elizabeth's psyche, shaping her into a woman driven by a thirst for control and domination. As the years rolled on, Elizabeth's life took a turn when she was betrothed to Ferenc Nadasti. At first glance, Ferenc seemed like the perfect match. He was not only dashing but also a powerful nobleman with a distinguished military career. Their union bore fruit, producing 5 children who appeared to be the picture of health. However, beneath this seemingly perfect facade, sinister undercurrents were already brewing. As Elizabeth's brood grew, so did her fascination with the occult, particularly the dark arts associated with blood rituals. This interest led her to believe that consuming the blood of young virgins could unlock the secret to eternal beauty and vitality. Driven by this deranged logic, Elizabeth embarked on a horrifying journey that would shock the world. Her reign of terror began with her own household, preying on young serving girls who were brought to the castle to cater to the needs of her family. Elizabeth's depravity knew no bounds as she subjected these innocent victims to unimaginable horrors, violating them and draining their life essence through painful blood rituals. With each passing day, the castle walls became stained with the innocent blood of her victims, transforming it into a macabre shrine to her dark desires. Elizabeth's actions did not go unnoticed. Rumors of her heinous deeds spread like wildfire, reaching the ears of King Matthias II of Hungary. Concerned by these whispers, the king dispatched investigators to the castle to uncover the truth behind the rumors. However, Elizabeth, with her web of deceit and manipulation, managed to keep her activities hidden from the prying eyes of the investigators. As the years went by, Elizabeth's thirst for blood only intensified, leading her to expand her reign of terror beyond her castle walls. She ventured into the nearby villages, targeting young women and draining their life essence in secluded areas. The villagers, unaware of the danger lurking in their midst, sent their daughters to work in the castle, believing it to be a safe haven. Little did they know that they were sending them to their doom. With each passing day, the number of missing girls grew, and fear became a constant companion for the villagers. As the body count rose, the pressure mounted on King Matthias II to investigate further. Elizabeth, sensing the heat closing in on her, escalated her blood rituals, attempting to prolong her life even further. She assembled her followers in the castle's crypt, and together they performed increasingly frenzied rituals. The air grew thick with the coppery scent of blood, mingling with the stench of decay and death. Elizabeth, her eyes wild with fanaticism, believed that these rituals would grant her immortality. But as the castle transformed into a chamber of horrors, she was oblivious to the approaching end of her twisted saga. One fateful night, Elizabeth's world came crashing down when soldiers arrived at the castle, their presence heralding the beginning of the end. Elizabeth, along with her brother Gabor and her loyal servant Anna, stood before the altar in the crypt, ready to perform their most sinister ritual yet. As the soldiers burst into the chamber, what they witnessed would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The sight of Elizabeth and her accomplices drenched in blood, surrounded by the corpses of their victims, was enough to send shivers down their spines. In that moment, the truth of Elizabeth's horrifying deeds was laid bare, and justice finally began to take its course. Elizabeth, the Blood Countess, was a woman driven by an insatiable thirst for blood and power. Her story serves as a chilling reminder of the depths of depravity to which a human being can sink. From her humble beginnings, under the cruel tutelage of her mother, to her descent into sadistic blood rituals, Elizabeth's life was a testament to the corrupting nature of unchecked ambition. Her obsession with maintaining her beauty led her to commit atrocities that shocked the very core of society. As the walls of her castle bore witness to the countless horrors that unfolded within, Elizabeth created a legacy of fear and bloodshed that echoed through the ages. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the darkness. If you've enjoyed this chilling tale, please don't forget to show your support. Your engagement means the world to me. And if you're eager for more spine-tingling stories, make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on new episodes. Until next time, stay safe and keep your doors locked, because you never know when darkness might come knocking. The end came swiftly, like a storm swallowing the sun. When royal guards breached the gates of Lactis Castle in 1610, Elizabeth stood at her window, her silhouette a tragic figure against the winter sky. Snow fell around her, as if the heavens themselves were weeping ashes from a pyre. Below, The cobblestones echoed with the clamor of men and the whinny of stamping horses. For 53 years, Elizabeth had watched such comings and goings from this very spot, secure in the knowledge that no one dared disturb her within the fortress walls. But now, as whispers of rebellion against her family reached even this remote corner of Hungary, she knew her time had come. When the first battering ram struck the oak doors, Elizabeth turned from the window and walked slowly to the hearth. There she knelt before the cold stones, tracing the lines on her face as if memorizing their topography. Her lips moved in a silent whisper, lamenting the passage of time and the beauty that had slipped through her fingers like sand. Each crease, each wrinkle was a testament to a life lived in shadows, a life of sin. And in that moment of desolate solitude, she understood that the grand machinations, the elaborate rituals, the seas of blood she had commanded, none of it had brought her peace. If anything, it had brought her here to this precipice of terror, kneeling in the dying embers of her once glorious existence. As the assault on the castle intensified, Elizabeth rose and went to her bedroom. There, in the flickering glow of a single candle, she stood before the full-length mirror, a relic from a bygone era when her family-est star shone brightest in the firmament of European nobility. She gazed at the woman reflected back, her face haggard, her eyes hollowed by fear and regret. This was the consequence of a lifetime spent dancing with darkness, a waltz that had left her isolated, reviled, and now hunted. Elizabeth was the last of the Bathiani, a name synonymous with power, privilege, and a creeping dread that had seeped into the hearts of commoners and nobles alike. Over the past 2 centuries, her ancestors had ruled these lands with an iron fist, crushing dissent, and hoarding wealth, while rumors of their grotesque practices spread like a miasma across Europe. Whispers of blood drinking, virgin sacrifices, and uncanny longevity clung to the family like a shroud, tainting their reputation and sealing their fate. And then there was Elizabeth's brother, a man who would rather be dead than alive. When he wasn't locked away in his chambers nursing his wounds and sorrows, he prowled the castle's halls like a tormented spectre. His emaciated frame, once robust and athletic, was now a canvas of pain, a testament to decades of self-loathing. Gabor was a scholar, a dabbler in alchemy and obscure lore, and it was his obsession with the arcane that had led the family down a path of no return. His journals spoke of a desperate bid to cheat death, a pact made with forces beyond human ken. In exchange for power and dominion, the family pledged their very souls, dooming not just themselves but future generations to an existence of torment and isolation. Catalin, meanwhile, sought solace in the memory of their parents. In the grand ballroom of the castle, now gathering dust and cobwebs, she relived the laughter and gaiety of long-ago days when her mother, the former Countess Orsolia, had graced these very floors with her presence. Memories were all that remained of Orsolia, whose untimely demise had cast a long shadow over the family. The Countess had been found dead in her chamber, drained of blood and bearing strange marks on her body, wounds that resembled nothing so much as the kiss of a vampire. Accusations flew, suspicion fell upon the family, yet the truth was never uncovered, allowing rumors to flourish and fears to take root. But no one suffered more than Anna, the young maid who had unwittingly served the family their doom. Hired to care for Elizabeth, Anna had become privy to the family's darkest secrets. She witnessed the satanic rituals, the summoning of unspeakable entities, and the descent of her mistress into a state of feral madness. Driven by a mixture of morbid fascination and creeping dread, Anna had kept meticulous records of these horrors, chronicling them in a diary that was as much a shield against madness as it was a repository of family disgrace. But now, as royal investigators closed in on the castle, Anna knew her secret could no longer protect her. She had to escape, flee, and warn the world of the horrors she had seen. But as she slipped through the castle gates, the weight of her actions pressed down on her, threatening to crush her like a beetle underfoot. With every step away from Lactus, the ghosts of the tortured girls she couldn't save seemed to gather at her heels, their silent screams echoing in her ears. The world outside the castle walls offered little respite either, for everywhere Anna turned, she saw the accusatory stares of strangers. They, too, had heard the whispers about the Blood Countess and her kin. Some pitied her, seeing in her eyes the haunting reflection of their own nightmares. Others seethed with righteous anger, blaming her for the evils that festered within the castle walls. In the end, it was as if the entire world conspired to punish Anna for merely bearing witness to evil. Shunned and reviled, she drifted from village to village, a nameless, faceless wanderer, her life a shadow of what it could have been. Her tragic end was marked by no monument, her passing recorded in no annals. History, it seemed, had deemed her unworthy of even oblivion. Back at the castle, Gabriel, the aging alchemist, found himself dragged from his chambers and thrown into the dungeons. Down in the dank, dimly lit cells, he confessed everything, his words tumbling out in a torrent of regret and despair. He spoke of how the family's cannibalism stretched back generations, a twisted bid to absorb the strength and power of their enemies. He described the grotesque feasts they had shared, the taste of human flesh still lingering on his tongue like ashes. He told of how he and his sister Elizabeth had dipped their bread in the blood of innocents, believing it would grant them eternal life, only to find themselves more alone and more cursed than ever. Catalan, meanwhile, sought out her brother in the dim lamplight of the dungeon, her eyes swollen with unshed tears. She begged him to recant, to deny the charges against them, to hold fast to the hope that they might yet escape this web of their own creation. But Gabor was adamant. He had nothing left to lose, no hope for redemption. All he desired now was oblivion, a release from the blood that had bound him for so long. And as the executioners prepared to bring his ordeal to a close, his last thought was not of pain or shame, but of a hard-won peace, a quiet corner of oblivion where even memories had ceased to linger. Outside, the townspeople gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disgust. They jeered and made obscene gestures, oblivious to the turmoil raging within the condemned man's soul. Then, with a swift, practiced stroke, the executioner's axe fell, severing the bonds of flesh and blood that had held to this world. As the castle fell and the Betri name was dragged through the mud, Elizabeth remained untouched, spared the scaffold by her noble blood. Instead, she was walled alive in a tower room, her world reduced to a slit of sky above the door. For 4 years, she languished in the gloom, her beauty fading to a skeletal husk, her final breath a sigh lost in the empty halls. The castle itself eventually succumbed to the relentless march of time, its stones crumbling, its secrets whispered on the wind. Yet even in ruin, it stands as a grim reminder of the family that once held court within its walls, a dynasty devoured by its own hunger. Today, fragments of the Betri story live on in museums and manuscripts, a macabre tapestry woven with threads of crimson horror and shadowed regret. Visitors to the castle can still see Elizabeth's mirror, cracked and dust-covered, reflecting not just her face but the darkness that can lurk in the human heart. It serves as a haunting reminder that some thrones are built on bones, and the price of rule can consume the ruler. And as the winter snows blanket the ruins of Lactis, the wind carries faint cries, eternal echoes of a family that feasted on flesh to cling to power, only to be swallowed by the very abyss they courted. Their tragic fates bound by blood, undone by it paint, a somber portrait of ambition's fatal embrace, leaving the world to ponder the monsters we create in the pursuit of immortality.